Ryan Bohl. He is a senior Middle East and North Africa analyst at RANE, a platform that helps organizations manage risk. And he joins us live from Philadelphia. Very good to have you here on the program. You heard these words here from Abbas Araghchi. We've heard from other officials talking about some good progress made in these talks. What's your key takeaway from today's negotiations in Vienna, in Geneva?
I would call it extremely limited diplomatic momentum. It keeps the negotiation tracks alive. It keeps the two sides talking to one another, but it has clearly not suggested that any of the major gaps between them, from uranium enrichment, where that's going to take place, to the stockpiles, to, of course, the more tricky things of missiles and proxies, none of that appears to have been bridged in the course of these talks. Instead, it seems like both sides want to signal that they want to continue these talks and to see how they will develop. The issue with that is that the United States' patience with those talks is not limitless, and we just don't know when President Trump might finally lose interest in continued negotiations and decide to carry out strikes to see if the strikes will change the diplomatic process.
I was going to ask you that because during the last round of talks last summer, Donald Trump launched that 12-day war on Iran right in the middle of those ongoing talks. Is there a risk that you think that the U.S. might not wait for next week's talks in Vienna and might just move ahead with another strike on Iran in the middle of these talks?
Yes, I think that is a realistic concern, that the United States might begin strikes unilaterally. And I think it's also realistic at this stage to consider Israeli strikes, as we saw in June of 2025. We know that the White House has been discussing the Israelis as an option because it's seen as more politically palatable here in the United States for Israel to make the first move rather than the U.S. But yes, this is a very real risk given recent American behavior and lots of leaks that we're getting from the Pentagon and the White House that Trump wants to carry out what he's thinking of as limited strikes on the Iranians, call them off, de-escalate, and see if that weakens the Iranians' resolve on some of these trickier things. Like, again, where does the uranium go? The Americans want it out of Iran, and the Iranians have made it very clear that they want it to remain in Iran, even if they're willing to have limits and inspections for it.
Ryan, ahead of these talks, we heard from several senior U.S. officials talking about how big of a threat that Iran is and how they want to acquire nuclear weapons. Let's listen to what some of those U.S. officials have been saying.
But the principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically. But of course, the president has other options as well.
I won't speculate as to how far away they are, but they are certainly trying to achieve, and this is not new, they're trying to achieve intercontinental ballistic missiles. For example, you've seen them try to launch satellites into space. You've seen them increasing the range of the missiles they have now. And clearly they are headed in a pathway to one day being able to develop weapons that could reach the continental U.S. They already possess weapons that could reach much of Europe already now.
Ryan, these words from Marco Rubio, for example, claiming that Iran already has weapons that can reach Europe right now. Is this a repeat of the buildup that we saw ahead of the invasion of Iraq 2003, when the U.S. falsely claimed that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction?
Well, there's an element of reality in what Rubio is saying. The Iranians do have long-range missiles that can reach southeastern Europe, unlike Saddam's WMD program, which turned out it didn't exist at all. It had been dismantled almost a decade prior. But Vance's comments that they want to rebuild a nuclear weapon implies that they ever had a nuclear weapon. And Iran never has had a nuclear weapon. It's never tested one. It has done some research in that direction, but from a political standpoint, they've made it clear that they consider a nuclear weapon to be something unnecessary for them, something they don't want to do. So there is some of that distortion of Iran's intents. After all, Iran's foreign policies are designed to defend Iran and to assert its interests throughout the region. That crashes into an American and Israeli interests in the region, but it doesn't quite create that threat of apocalyptic destruction destruction that is suggested by some of these folks from the White House. Iran isn't interested in, say, smuggling a nuclear weapon into the United States. It isn't interested in a mutually assured destruction scenario. It wants to assert its own regional influence. And yes, that is a problem for the U.S. and for the Israelis. But again, it doesn't want to cause this kind of mushroom cloud over New York experience that I think that this administration is trying to sell to the public, even at this late hour, given the buildup that's already taken place there.
All right, Ryan Bohl, thank you so much for your time. Really interesting to hear your analysis here on the program.